Hi, I'm Tim from EcoQue. In this video, we're going to give you some cooking tips on doing pork butts in our Artisan smoker oven. There are many great cookbooks out there with recipes for pork butts, and there are chefs that have prepared these recipes who are far more experienced than me. What I want to do today is give you some guidelines for operating the smoking chamber in our wood oven to achieve great results with any of these recipes that you want to use. So please feel free to experiment once you've learned the fundamentals of cooking butts. We're also going to give you two different ways to wrap, rest, and finish the butts. Allow yourself enough time to prepare pork butts. The whole process is at least 12 hours long, and some chefs take even more time than that. One of the methods we'll show you today will also allow you to start the butts the night before and then finish them off on the cooking stone overnight. Remember, there are three phases to cooking butts or any meats in a smoker. The three phases of low and slow are smoking, wrapping, and resting. I use an easy to remember method when I smoke butts in our oven. Phase 1 is to smoke your butts between 250 and 275 degrees Fahrenheit. You'll smoke them until they reach an internal temperature of 165 degrees. Phase 2. Cook your butts wrapped in aluminum foil until they reach an internal temperature of 195 degrees Fahrenheit. Phase 3 will be to rest them in the foil for about another 2 hours wrapped in old towels and placed in an empty cooler or resting box. Then they'll be ready to pull. Today we're going to prepare boneless butts. The smoker oven will hold two full-size butts, either boneless or bone-in, but I recommend tying them up to hold the meat together after you've put rub on them. You can also brine the butts overnight if you want to, or inject them with marinade. Feel free to try any number of great recipes available for different preparations of pork butts. I always recommend doing 2 butts at a time because there's a lot of shrinkage when you cook them. The meat will also store or freeze well once it's been pulled and sauced. It can easily be reheated as well. The first step is to use a good quality pork rub and a little bit of raw sugar and rub it liberally all over the sides of the butts. Make sure you use plenty of rub and that you work the rub deeply into the surface of the meat. The next step will be to take some butcher's twine and tie up the butts nice and tight in both directions. At this point, you can also inject the butts with some marinade. Now that the pork butts are all tied up and ready to go into the oven, it's important that you take a temperature probe from a digital thermometer and stick it into the center of the pork butt that will be towards the front of the oven. Place the butts in the oven and make sure they are centered directly over the drip pan. I usually add about 1 quart of liquid to the drip pan. You could use some of your brine in the drip pan, or I use a combination of 50% water and 50% apple juice. Remember not to put too much liquid in the pan because there are a lot of drippings that will be coming off the pork butts. After several hours, the pork butts will reach an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit. I generally cook pork butts between 250 degrees and 275 degrees Fahrenheit until they reach that internal temp of 165. Keep the smoker door closed as much as possible and make sure your fire is delivering plenty of smoke. Don't open the door of the smoker during the first couple of hours, as long as you're within the recommended cooking temperature range and that your meat temperature thermometer is also beginning to climb. You should only need to check on your pork butts once or twice during the cooking process. If you want to add some mopping sauce, make sure that the rub has had a chance to set up into a nice crust on the outside of the meat. After at least 2 hours, you can add mopping sauce to them. The butts are now ready to be wrapped. They've reached an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit, and now we're going to take them up to 195 degrees Fahrenheit. Remove the pork butts from the oven one at a time. Add some brown sugar, honey, and a little bit of barbecue sauce to the foil package. Once you've sealed the foil package and made it into a pouch, leave one end open and add 1 cup of apple juice. Wrap the butts in at least 2, but preferably 3 layers of heavy-duty aluminum foil. Wrap the foil tightly around the butts. Now that our pork butts are wrapped, we're going to show you 2 different methods that you can use to finish cooking them. One method is to simply place the pork butts back in the smoker box and cook them at a temperature of between 250 and 275 degrees Fahrenheit until they've reached that internal temperature that you need to hit of 195 degrees. The second method utilizes the heat that's been stored up in the pizza stone to finish cooking your pork butts overnight. To do this, you'll place your wrapped pork butts on a heavy-duty cookie sheet or baking pan and put that pan either on the wire rack placed on the stone or right directly on the stone itself. Close the oven up and don't add any more wood to the firebox. Now that our pork butts have reached an internal temperature of 195 degrees, we're going to rest them for a couple hours wrapped in towels and then place them in a cooler or a resting box. Once this is done, it's time to make pulled pork from the finished pork butts. Now that your pork butts have been resting, they're ready to pull. The first step is to carefully unwrap them and reserve the liquid in a spare bowl. You'll use some of these juices later on and mix them into the pulled pork. The pork butts will still be quite warm, so it's a good idea to wear latex gloves when you're pulling them apart. The first step is going to be to cut the string and remove as much of the outside fat as you can. Then you'll begin to work on the rest of the meat, separating the fat and the cartilage from the meat that you're going to save. Once the pork has been pulled, you're going to add some of your juice from the bag and some additional barbecue sauce along with the meat. Keep the pork warm for serving later on in a slow cooker on low temp. Or you can also put it in a storage container to be heated up later on.